All right, coaches, we'll get underway. Firstly, thanks again for joining us for the fourth installment of our online coaching clinics. It's been great to see the support so far and have so many presenters be willing to volunteer and give up their time. With a special thanks, obviously, to Mel and Mark again for this week as the presenters. Two great presentations coming up. The usual housekeeping, please stay on mute, and for questions, please just send them through to me. It's Wyndham B-Ball Reece. If you send them through, find that in the chat and send it direct to me, and I'll ask at the appropriate time. Like I said, excited about tonight and having two different presenters on different topics. And first up, we've got Mel Downer. Mel currently works for Basketball New Zealand as a talent manager. But she's also heavily worked in Australia with Basketball Queensland, the COE as a head and assistant coach, heavily involved with the Australian and New Zealand junior national teams, and is currently the New Zealand Under-15 Men's Head Coach. And she's presenting on tagging up defensive transitions. So very lucky to have Mel, very grateful for her to give up her time, and I'll pass over to her now.
Thanks, Reece. Let me see if I can get my screen going. Share screen. That's the one. All right, can everyone see that all right?
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'll just get rid of that. So I'll just lead off with, I'm currently in lockdown in New Zealand at the moment, so the internet has been taking a bit of a beating. So if I have to turn my camera off, that's just to preserve internet quality. But thank you to Reece and Wyndham Basketball for the opportunity to present. This is obviously challenging and unprecedented times that we're all facing, but I guess with adversity comes opportunity, and the opportunity to connect and share with other coaches and learn is something that we don't often get to do in our normal time poor lives, and I guess is a real silver lining of this whole ordeal. So before I start, just for some context, this is just my view on tagging up. There are no absolutes in basketball. That old adage that there are more ways to skin a cat is very true when it comes to basketball. I teach tagging up really differently to other coaches, and I emphasize different things to what other coaches emphasize. So don't take what I say as gospel, but rather as a starting point to form your own opinions and mold your own views on tagging up and how it might fit into your system. Tagging up won't be for everybody, and I'm not here to sell you the answer to all your D-trans woes. I wish I could, but I hope that I can shed a bit more light on tagging up as a scheme and some of its benefits and how it might be able to help your teams. Also, tagging up here in New Zealand is called jamming up, and I have spent the last 12 months training myself not to say tagging up. So if I switch between tagging up and jamming up, I apologise, but they're the same thing. Reece already said a little bit about me, but I'm a former WNBL player, very brief. That's probably the only photographic evidence that there is. 20 years coaching experience, predominantly in the junior high performance space, started out in rep teams, moved up into state teams, and that's me coaching a Queensland team with my daughter Evie in a timeout. I'm sure all the parents on here can relate. And then moved up into national programs and national teams. Currently working for Basketball New Zealand and living in beautiful Christchurch, but formerly employed by Basketball Australia and Basketball Queensland. Really, really blessed and lucky to have international experience with both Australia and New Zealand junior national teams. I don't take those opportunities for granted. I know that it's really difficult to represent one country, let alone two. So I feel very lucky to have had those experiences. And tagging up was a feature in all of them. All right, so to get into it, what is tagging up? And in a nutshell, tagging up is the action that occurs on the rise of the shot. So it works on the premise of moving forward and tagging the player that guards you when a shot is in an effort to be matched up quickly and to force your opponent to box you out. Essentially, if they are boxing you out, they're not running in transition. This also puts you in a position to potentially come up with an offensive rebound. So to me, tagging up is what happens before defensive transition, before any change of possession occurs. But once a change of possession occurs, then the choice is yours, is really what you do. I follow traditional defensive transition rules, but really it's up to you what you do post tag up. So some influencing, so why tag up, sorry. Shooting the ball, particularly in junior basketball, I feel, this is all just my opinion, is almost viewed as the initiation to a change of possession. It's almost an assumption that you no longer have possession. That D-trans is the next automatic step, regardless of the quality of the shot. We almost have a passive response to shooting the ball that fosters a reactive mindset to defense. But who actually has possession of the ball when it has been shot? And what happens when we view shooting as a possible opportunity as opposed to a probable missed opportunity? What if our response to the basketball being shot was to be proactive and aggressive? So I guess why tag up? It's an opportunity to exploit any mental gaps by teams or individuals. We know from the analytics that increased shooting percentage on possessions of turnovers, generally because they're layups off a turnover. We also know from the analytics that shooting percentage on offensive rebounds is higher. Again, they're generally layups or free throws. And shooting percentage also reduces as the shot clock deepens. So the deeper we go into the shot clock, the longer it's going, the less likely we are to make a shot. 5-on-5 is also the lowest shooting percentage. And half-court offense is about creating 1-on-0 and high predictable shots, so more ability to be disruptive and tag up. We also know from the NBA and all the advanced analytics that are out there that the possession game is absolutely critical to result. Offensive rebounding possession, turnover percentage, turnover ratio, all of that are key factors to success. So trying to generate more possessions just makes sense. The more possessions that you have, the less pressure that there is on each individual possession to score, is how I like to view it. So these are some of the key factors that influence how tagging up came about and why. And I really can't take a lot of credit for all of this. A lot of this work was done by my husband Mick, who did a lot of this work for the Cairns Taipans when they were implementing it. He did all the groundwork on investigating and really nutting down into tagging up as to whether that would be a good structure and a good scheme for them. And eventually, I think it really paid off for them, being a small market team. It gave them a competitive advantage. But the finding of those influencive factors were that the objective of offense is to generate those rotations and mismatches and get those high percentage shots. And what could they do after that? In line with that, the style of play. Why do we have a style of play? Why do we run offense? It's to generate predictable shots from predictable spots, from predictable people. So if we know when, where, and from who a shot is going to be taken, we can more effectively tag up and be proactive after a shot is taken. The game got shorter as well. We went down to 40-minute games. That meant less playing time, less fatigue, more opportunity to be aggressive and proactive. Observations of opponents was another big one. So, I mean, everyone's had experience watching Victorian Metro State teams, and I know I've been at their mercy a few times playing against them. They're renowned for relentless pressure on a defensive rebounder, often sending two to defend a rebounder. They bury teams with stifling full court pressure, all by being there on the chain of a possession. Damian Martin makes a living from being an absolute pest and generating steals from pickpocketing rebounders. And he's also a great offensive rebounder. 4 factors analytics from the NBA, rebounding percentage factors heavily there. And something that was really interesting is basketball IQ and decision-making capacity. Where I found this really useful or really prevalent is in the junior age group, 16s, 18s and 20s. Their ability to make decisions under pressure really influences why I choose to use tagging up as a defensive transition scheme. So I guess I challenge coaches to try and view and coach defense the same way that you view and coach offense, which is an opportunity to create some sort of advantage. So the benefits of tagging up, just for some context, I used some analytics from when I was a part of the Sapphires coaching staff from 2017 and 2018, purely because I had that data handy. I'd pre-cut everything for a case study that I wrote, so it was just easy for me to grab that information. But by the very nature of putting yourself in a rebounding position by tagging up, you are going to generate more O boards, and by getting more O boards, you get more possessions. So for reference, the Sapphires at the 2017 FIBA Asia Cup came up with 51% of the available offensive rebounds, which is an extraordinary amount of offensive rebounds to come up with. This allowed us to have on average approximately 18 possessions a game more than our opponents, and especially in the junior space, when you have 18 more bites at the cherry, you're going to be successful. By playing against tagging up in training, by practicing against that, you're automatically going to become a better defensive rebounding team. If you know that someone is coming at you and trying to push you and scrum you and jam you into the keyway, you're going to do everything in your power to stop them from being able to do that. So you automatically become an improved defensive rebounding team just by being a tagging up team. You also have improved one-on-one defensive accountability. Again, if you're always defending in the full court, you're automatically going to get better at that. If you don't get better at it, you're going to sit on the bench with the coach. So it improves the defensive accountability. And on the flip side, the person handling the ball, they're constantly under pressure. So they're learning to deal with that a lot better. We already spoke about the opposition decision-making. Decision-making under pressure is severely hindered. So if a rebounder catches the ball, turns around, all of a sudden they're heavily defended, they can't make an outlet pass, or a point guard is under pressure from the minute that they catch the ball, decision-making then is really hindered. It creates and generates that front foot mentality and generates opportunistic pressure. So from the tag up, you're matched up quickly, you're able to trap, you're able to run and jump, you're able to get into your zone press, whatever it is that you want to do post tag up, you're able to do that. Something that's really interesting is that wears teams down mentally and physically. They are battling constant pressure. Come the fourth quarter, teams are really struggle to deal with the continual tagging up, having to box out, having to be physical. It becomes a real mind game. It also increases shot clock pressure, which again plays with athletes' minds. If they're constantly on the back foot and not able to run their offense and having to get into their late shot clock options, it makes it really difficult, particularly for young athletes. Some of the perceived risks of tagging up, it's relatively new and different, so therefore it can be scary. That can really hinder the ability for the athletes and the coaches to buy in. And there's not many experts or case studies. I think if you Google tagging up, I don't know if anything comes up or not much comes up. So there's no one to talk to. There's not many people to rely on. It's not very well known, and that can be scary. So as part of my role for the Sapphires, because of that, I wrote a case study which was analysing the effectiveness of tagging up at the Asia Cup and providing recommendations to Shannon, the head coach, moving forward about whether we should continue or not with tagging up and what we needed to improve in tagging up if we were to continue for the Under-17 World Cup. Reece has a copy of that if anyone, I'm more than happy to share it. So if anyone wants that, just reach out to Reece. Another perceived risk is that it's counterintuitive. You're moving forward and not backwards. So athletes can feel really vulnerable and exposed by not running back and protecting the basket. The counter to that is providing comfort through ball pressure. So showing them that the ball is being taken care of, the risk of a long pass is low, as long as there's adequate ball pressure. Mismatches is another perceived risk, which I find really interesting, given that that's a risk of any defensive transition. If offense is generated, trying to generate mismatches, it doesn't matter what defensive transition scheme you run, you're always going to have a mismatch. So my view on it is mismatches in defensive transition won't hurt you, but open players or unguarded basketball will. Another risk is that it can be physically tough. There's a constant banging of bodies. If you have an athlete that doesn't like banging bodies, I'd question why they're playing basketball in the first place. But this can be tough for some athletes to get past, that they're constantly being hit or hitting others. So some of the key teaching points. It's a real change of mindset. So it's a guard who guards you. So rather than me having number 7, I just have whoever is in front of me at the point of a shot. So that could be number 10, it could be number 12. It really doesn't matter. Whoever is in front of me on the rise of the shot, that's who I guard. On the rise of the shot, I'm moving forward and we're getting on the high side. So we want to get between them and their basket and really take away a straight line for them to run to their basket. If your player leaks out, and a leak out is where someone runs without boxing you out, so effectively cherry picking, then you run with them and it becomes a foot race. You want to tag your player and scrum or jam them. I think this is why New Zealand calls it jamming. I actually don't know why it's called jamming in New Zealand. I actually do like the term better though. It describes better what you're doing, is you're trying to jam your opposition into the keyway, further away from their basket, but also putting yourself in a better rebounding position. It's really important that you want to show your hands to the ref and that you want to scrum or jam with your lower body, not with your hands in the back. We want to force them to box us out, and we want to generate 50-50 contests and tips. And what I mean by that is if we're able to get a hand on the ball or keep it in the air, we may be able to tip it back to my own player. Or if I can keep it in the air long enough, it allows my back side of defense to get themselves in position. So it just buys some time. So we really value those 50-50 contests and those tips. And then the O-board opportunities are just a bonus. It's really important to note that we are not encouraging players to pursue offensive rebounds at the expense of sound defensive transition principles. This is really hard for athletes to get their head around at first, but an athlete can rebound the ball in a 50-50 contest if the ball bounces their way from the defensive side of their opponent. So if they're behind their opponent, they're between them and their basket, they've jammed them or scrummed them into a rebounding position and the ball comes their way, they're able to go get it. Kamikaze style chasing of O-boards, however, is an available tactical adjustment as a result of tagging up should you need it. I have been privy to this being utilised. My former counterpart in North Queensland, Brady Wormsley, actually recommended it to North Queensland girls team as a tactic to try and generate more possessions. So they wouldn't have been able to do that, or they would have found it really difficult to chase those O-boards if they hadn't already been familiar with tagging up and with moving forward as opposed to moving backwards. So it is an interesting tactical adjustment that is there should you need it in times of extreme cases. Some other key teaching points are early threat neutralization, or the 3 threats. So these are your D-trans. These are the 3 things that I would suggest that you prioritise post tag up. Mine are ball pickup, obvious. I want the ball picked up. I want that taken care of. That allows some time for my backline to get in position. I want to prioritise flooding the floor. I really want to present a crowd. I really want to take up space. I really want to make that ball handler feel like they're suffocated. They don't have any room to move. And I really want to deny strong side kicker heads, that real obvious down the sideline pass on the strong side. So what I'm willing to give up in that scenario is a neutral or negative pass in the backcourt. There has been, I guess, a trend in recent times coming from Europe and the NBA are picking up now as well, is the long and opposite pass. If there's adequate ball pressure, again, that pass is really difficult to make. So as long as the ball, number one, is taken care of, that long and opposite pass shouldn't be a factor to worry about. Again, mismatches. We want to stay matched up to who was guarding me at the point of the shot. But I can switch back in the quarter court when it's safe to do so, and after all urgent early threats have been dealt with. Every drill where a shot is taken is a tagging up drill at training. So you don't need specific tagging up drills. There are tagging up drills that you can do that are specific just to tagging up, that really are just useful in early stages of implementing the scheme. But really every drill is a tagging up drill, even on zero. You can foster that forward movement and getting athletes used to moving forward every time they shoot the ball, 1 on 0, 2 on 0, 3 on 0, whatever the shooting drill is, that everyone gets feet in the paint. So they're practicing that forward movement and it becomes second nature. It's really important as well that we teach our shooters to stay in their shot and finish their shooting action before tagging up. It's really common to see when you implement tagging up that they pull out of their shot real quickly to try and get into their tagging up. But we want shooters to land, stay in their shot, finish their shooting action, and then get into their tag up. Implementing tagging up. And this is all from my experience over the years and tools and tips and tricks that have really helped me be successful with tagging up and have my teams implement it successfully. Predictable shot selection, number one, makes any D-Trans system more effective. It doesn't matter what system you run. If you know where your shots are coming from, where out of your offensive scheme they're coming from, who it's coming from, where and when, it makes playing D-Trans more effective. So we really don't want random shots at any point of the shot clock. We want to make sure that we know what types of shots are coming from where and when. It must be underpinned by sound defensive one-on-one principles. If you take anything from this tagging up talk, please teach your athletes to play one-on-one. There's a real issue globally with athletes being able to guard the basketball, and tagging up does not work if you can't guard the basketball one-on-one effectively without fouling. I've also found it a lot easier for teams to pick up if you introduce the D-Trans rules post tag up first. They find it a lot easier for whatever reason, if they know what happens next on a change of possession, if they know what the 3 early threats are that they've got to take care of, if they know what zone press they're in, if they know where they're running and jumping. It just seems to allow a level of comfort, and they're able to be more comfortable with tagging up. I've also found it a lot easier to start with made basket scenarios as opposed to missed basket situations, which can be a little bit more random and unpredictable. Again, it just allows the defense some time to get themselves set. And missed basket situations are obviously a little bit more unpredictable and can be a little bit more difficult for them to pick up the scenario and feel success with the scheme if they don't quite understand where they're going to just yet. I'd also suggest nominating an assistant coach or a parent to be the designated tag up coach. If if there's one person that's really focused on being the tag up coach and yelling out tag up or jam up on the rise of the shot, and just reminding the athletes of what's happening next, that's been really effective as well. And if you watched any recent 2019 under-17 Oceania champs, I'm sure you can hear me on the fever from yelling jam up. Age and stage relevance. I've had lots of questions and spoken to lots of coaches about whether tagging up is relevant for junior age groups and younger age groups. Look, I think it is in its different elements, and there's different things that you emphasize at different age groups. So I'd suggest that with under 12s or youth teams of that nature, that there's a real emphasis on quick matchups and one-on-one defensive accountability. So you're not focusing on anything to do with offensive rebounding, nothing to do with full court defensive positioning. You're really working on being matched up quickly with the person that was guarding you at the point of the shot, and being able to guard the ball one-on-one. And then as you progress through the junior ranks, you can start to layer and introduce more concepts on top of that. So introducing full court defensive positioning at under 14s, starting to introduce the 50-50 contests and tips and leak outs and baseline spills, which I'll get onto in the next slide. And then also getting into advanced disruption concepts as you get to under 18. So looking at what you do on made buckets versus missed buckets, how you can go from tagging up to zone defense, how you can go from tagging up to half court defense, all those sorts of things. So yes, it's possible. It's more in what you emphasize at the different ages. Some considerations when you look at implementing tagging up is your own personal coaching philosophy. It really needs to fit with your philosophy and what you teach and how you teach defense, how you view defense. So it really starts there, whether it fits with how you teach half court defense, one-on-one defense, full court defense. Does tagging up fit into your philosophy? The depth of your team and their athleticism relative to the competition and your substitution patterns. And obviously, if you're going to tag up and play full court defense for an entire game, you're going to need to get deep into your bench. So you may need to review your substitution patterns. You need to review how much you use certain players early on in a tournament versus the end of the tournament. So you need to be really mindful of how you're using it and how it's relevant to your team and their athleticism. What you emphasize is critical. Some people call tagging up a defensive transition scheme. Others call an offensive rebounding scheme. It goes back to the question of who has possession of the ball when it's shot. I prefer to say defensive transition scheme purely because of what it emphasizes as being the priority. The minute that we prioritize offensive rebounding, particularly for juniors, the defensive transition side of thing gets forgotten, seems to fall out of their heads, and they start running and chasing those O boards with total disregard for any rules and any possible leak outs and numbers advantages created. So just be really careful with what you emphasize and why around offensive rebounds and D-trans. Player skill sets and caveats. Great offensive rebounders, are we going to tell them that they have to tag up and can't chase an O board? Look, great offensive rebounders have a really unique skill. And I personally wouldn't tell an offensive rebounder that they can't go and rebound the ball if that's their skill and what they bring to the team. So a really good example of that is Nus from the Sapphires, or Agnes Eminopu for you Victorians out there. She regularly came up with double-digit offensive rebounds per game. We weren't going to tell Nus that she couldn't go chase O boards. That was what she was good at. That was her skill. And that's what she brought to our team and did really well for us. But that was a caveat for her, that she knew she could go chase a rebound, but she also knew she better bloody as well. Caveats for athletes that are slow in the full court. So if it gets down to a foot race and you know that you've got an athlete that's not going to win that foot race, what can you do? Well, I mean, in those situations, that would be a safety trigger. So they would automatically, on rise of shot, make their way to a safety position so that they're already ahead of the basketball and they're not getting themselves in a position to be in a foot race that they are potentially going to lose. So you can adapt and mold tagging up to suit you. You can have 3 to the glass and 2 back, 4 to the glass and 1 back, or all 5 to the glass and none back. It really depends on your philosophy, on the athletes that you have and the teams that you're playing at that point in time. Some other things to consider is floor spacing. There's obviously a real trend at the moment to play deep in corners and high and wide. It's really difficult from those positions to, especially from the corner, to get over the top and high side of a player in between them and their basket. So I'm not going to get into it. There's some advanced concepts here, but over the top versus attacking elbows, and those situations where you can't get high side of a player, we want to try and get ourselves to the elbow where we can have vision of most of the court at that point in time and really assess what my next move is moving forward. But it's definitely a consideration depending on what offensive scheme that you run, whether you're going to get over the top or attack elbows. Safety triggers and numbers advantages, we spoke about that earlier. So baseline spills creates a numbers advantage. So a baseline spill is where you go up for a layup, you get knocked out of the play, and you now are in a situation where you're on 5 on 4. That generates automatically a safety trigger. So we need someone back at that point. We've got a numbers disadvantage. We need to have someone back protecting the basket, making sure that open player is not left alone by themselves. A leak out as well as a number advantage, that if that's not taken care of, again, that goes back to athletes that are slow in the full court. If continual leak outs are happening, it's either because a tag up hasn't happened, meaning there's been no contact made, the athlete hasn't been forced to box me out, so they're able to just run, or the tag up player is slow and can't beat them in a foot race. So that would automatically generate a safety. Something to be mindful of is live play turnovers. So a turnover that happens when without a shot. So what do you do there? That generally generates a numbers turnover. Those are really difficult no matter the scheme that you're running, but you do need to have a plan. And I would suggest tying it back to your 3 triggers, or your 3 neutral threats that you're trying to neutralize, is number 1, that you're going to pick up the ball. But it's definitely something that we noticed between Asia Cup and World Cup was something that we really needed to work on. What happened when we turned the ball over in a live play scenario without a shot? Another consideration is if on the rise of the shot, if the defense is in a zone, you can still tag up in a zone. You've just got to understand, 1, what kind of zone they're in, so then you can understand where the closest player to you is that you tag up. So it is still possible to tag or jam on a zone defense against a zone defense. Another consideration as well is game matchup communication. So pre-game, we're always, as coaches, trying to work out the preferred matchups and who we want guarding who. You've got to be really careful in this scenario that they leave who's guarding them to go to their preferred matchup and generating that leak out scenario. So the communication there needs to be that everyone is guarding everyone, and understanding when you're doing your scouting and providing scout reports to athletes, that everyone needs to understand the entire scout and not just their preferred matchup, because at some point in time they are likely to be matched up on someone that is not their preferred matchup. So it's just something to consider, your pre-game communication, how you communicate to your athletes to ensure that they're tagging up effectively. I've got some film and I hope that this works. And again, this was all just sort of pre-cut film that I had, so I knew it was what content it was and that it had what I wanted to show you guys. But we'll just get into, we'll turn that sound off. All right, so here you can see at the point of the shot, Shyla's shooting it from the corner, so that's really difficult to get over the top here. So at that point, we would say get to an elbow so you can assess the situation. But we've got one of the smallest kids on the court, G, getting two hands in the back, which we probably don't want to see. But Fowler's getting boxed out here. We're running in. And then get into the shot. And Georgia's put herself in a position where she's been able to get an offensive rebound, and she's the smallest kid on the court, all by just pushing her player really deep and into a position where she wasn't able to rebound the basketball. And now she gets a steal because, again, she's been able to match up really quickly as soon as that change of possession happens. So again, we got another corner shot. We've got two missed tag up. So this is the beautiful thing with tagging up. You're able to immediately tell who has done it and who hasn't, who's at fault and who isn't. There's no, is she above the foul line? Is she below? Is she going to the glass or is she long safety? It's very clear. We've got a missed tag up here and we've got a missed tag up here. But Eliza's able to come up with that rebound and we're able to get a second shot off. Again, Shyla and her famous long two. We've got running in, coming over the top, almost at the elbows. We've got LT, pushed her player into a position where she's not able to rebound the ball, so that's here. We've got Nuss making contact. We've got Fowler making contact. We've got no players running in transition. So that is successful in my mind when I look at that we've automatically negated Japan's ability to be able to run purely because they're having to worry about us. And again, we're able to get a second bite at the cherry. All right, so Fowler's taken a shot at the top of the keyway there. Izzy Palmer's missed a tag up. Jade's engaging her player here. Nussa's creating contact and pushing her player out of position. And there's her elite rebounding capabilities. And we're able to come up with a second possession. Again, Shyla with a long two. Occupying her player, occupying her player, occupying her player. Again, that's a pretty successful tag up possession. And we're able to get ourselves another baseline out of bounds. So you can see we're all moving forward. This here we need to be mindful of with Shyla is allowing her player to have a direct line to the basket. That is a potential leak out situation. So we did have to work with her on that in between Asia Cup and World Cup on staying this side of her player unless she knew she was able to come up with an offensive rebound. And again, Nuss and her go-go gadget arms was able to get us an extra possession. All right, so corner shot, you can see Jade's gone from the corner and is getting herself into the elbow area. We've got one missed tag up here. I think that's Palmer. but everyone else is engaging their player and no one is running into transition. We're able to get a couple of extra shots off. All right, so if we just rewind that a little and we watch Eliza, number 12 here, as Shyla drives and the shot goes up, she actually runs past her man here. This was a situation, in general terms, we probably wouldn't like that. She's allowed her player here to have a straight line to her basket, but looking at that matchup and knowing number 15 and that she's not the most agile athlete and that Eliza could beat her in a foot race in a straight line, I'd be happy that she's actually ran past her matchup at that point. But this is a baseline spill here. Shyla's out of bounds. She's out of play. Her player's in front of her. So we've got a numbers advantage generated. But Nuss here has done a really good job of pushing her player really deep and putting herself in a position that where she can get a tip on the ball and tip it to Eliza. All right, so we've got two players here tagging. We've got the shooter, I think that's Potter. Should be getting to elbows, and we've got two missed tag ups here. Being able to generate a foul on this side, I think that's actually Hannon, because she's forced her player to box her out or attempt to box her out and stop her from getting the O board. So she's actually drawn a foul in that scenario. All right, so on the rise of the shot, this is going low side. If we watch number 10, I think that's Potter there. She's going low side of her play, so she's allowed number 7 a direct line. That's what we don't want. We want her to be on the other side of her play here. So we've done a good job. We've gotten over the elbows. Nuss has gotten over the top. We need to be mindful that we're not running past our man. G's done a really good job of engaging her player. And again, we've generated a foul. So tagged up, tagged up, tagged up, finished her shot, assessed the situation, and now she's in a position to be able to contest the rebound and get on the floor. And now we're to defend the ball, and we're able to negate that transition. All right, so corner shot, we're all moving forward, we're all creating contact. Jade's getting herself to the elbow. She's seen a change of possessions happen, and we've got a leak out. So she has seen this leak out here. So someone has run past their man. Who is that? Looks like Potter. Potter has run to double team the ball and run past her man here. So that's a safety situation, and Jade was able to see that just after finishing her shot, getting herself to an elbow and recognising a leak out situation. All right, so we're tagged up, tagged up, tagged up, missed tag up. All right, so again, really easy to see where we need to improve. But Kelsey, this is what I talk about, mismatch. She's the biggest kid on our team. She was a big baby giraffe, bottom age. At that point in time, was still really learning to control and understand her body. And she's in a mismatch situation here. She's guarding a wing player who's actually pretty agile and very good. And her ability here to be able to pressure that basketball and force a negative pass as opposed to a positive one, she did a really good job. We can see we're creating contact. Aids on our way in, creating contact. Everyone's jammed up. We're able to guard the ball full court under pressure, and we cause a turnover. We're all jammed up, tagged up over the high side, probably a bit on the low side. Able to get a tip, and my teammate was able to clean it up. So that's why those tips are really important and really valuable. If you can tip the ball up in the air, you're able to see where it's going and possibly tip it to a teammate. All right, so this is G being a little bit kamikaze. She's over this side here. Shot comes up, she goes low side of her player, and she's just so lucky that her player is too worried about her rebounding the ball that she creates contact anyway. But we want to make sure that we're going high side. And now she's out of position. So we've got we're at a numbers disadvantage here at the moment. But because we're able to apply really good ball pressure, we've been able to negate the fact that we're at a numbers disadvantage. So point of shot, creating contact, running in, pushed her player in. We're able to get that tip. We didn't get possession, but at this point, we're able to at least get set up into whatever disruption that we want to be in at this point. So pretty good effort here. There's a lot of contact. There's no one running to the opposite basket. We've come up with an O board. We've got a second shot. We're again tagged up pretty decent. And Palmer gets a questionable foul on that one. All right, that's me. So look, that was really a broad overview of tagging up. There's a lot of intricate detail that you can get into around baseline spills, around attacking the elbows, around leak outs, but that's an overview of tagging up, its benefits, how it might be able to help your teams, and hopefully I've been able to alleviate some fears that people possibly have around tagging up being scary.
That was awesome, Mel. Thanks so much for your detailed presentation. We're getting questions sort of throughout, and some of them you were actually answering just with the amount of detail you went into. So it was really, really good. I do have a fair few. I'll try and get through a couple of questions before we start with Mark. So once you've done the tag up, why pick the ball up in the full court, and what happens if the player with the ball gets beaten?
Yeah, so you don't have to pick the ball up in the full court. I think I did allude to that briefly. You can tag up and maintain that contact, and then on change of possession decide that you're going to... that possibly could be because they've got an elite ball handler that we're not staying in front of well. I guess if they get beat, then we're in a scramble situation. That would be an oh shit moment.
Fair enough. That's good. How does that sort of aggressive defense, or not aggressive defense, but being up the floor, how does it flow into sort of pick and roll defense in transition?
Yeah, so that's what I mean about it matching your philosophy in the way that you defend everything. So if it doesn't match how you want to guard the ball in a pick and roll situation, then you really have to rethink whether that's the right philosophy or the right scheme for your team, or whether you can mold it and adapt it to fit what you want to do. But yeah, that's certainly a consideration.
For sure. What about some communication tips for young players who might be new to tagging up? and there might be mismatches and things like that. How do you sort of encourage them to work through that?
Through the mismatch or the communication?
Probably both, I think, is the coach's question. Yeah.
Yeah, look, that is really difficult. Kids in particular feel really uncomfortable if they're not matched up with their preferred matchup or like for like, so guards with guards, bigs with bigs. I guess the important thing is making sure that the ball is taken care of and allowing them the opportunity to switch back at a point that's appropriate in the half court. So as soon as you've been able to establish that transition offense has stopped and that they're into their half court set and things are a bit slower, how can we now get ourselves into a position where we're switching back? So maybe that's off the ball on the weak side in an exchange situation. Maybe that is a pick and roll situation where you're switching back onto preferred matchups. But that is something that you have to practice a lot to make kids comfortable with that. And it is a lot easier, I suppose, in the modern game when kids are a lot more versatile and athletes are a lot more multi-skilled, that if they're able to pass, shoot, dribble the ball from 1 through 5, then they need to be able to defend that as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. How do you start, obviously, with teaching players to sort of go against that natural instinct of just running past their player and hunting that rebound? How do you sort of work on that? Because obviously they've got to sort of overcome that instinct and become really disciplined to the system. How do you sort of work on that?
Yeah, I think the emphasis is really important. So what you emphasize, I don't even mention that you're able to get an O board when I'm introducing tagging up. That's something that comes once they've become established with tagging up, and that motion is not foreign to them anymore, and they're able to create that contact and get in a good position and be high side. And once that's natural, then I start introducing, okay, now when you're in this position, if you're able to get a tip, then you're able to do so, but it can't come at the expense of a layup. I guess also what you reward is important. So if I like to reward 8-second violations. So obviously you can't get an 8-second violation if you've run past your man and allowed them to rebound the ball. I also like to reward at training if you're able to get 5 opposition players jammed up or tagged up into the keyway. So they really understand that the emphasis is on jamming that player as far into the keyway as they can.
Oh, that's awesome. Last one. Do you have much trouble with offensive fouls in that scrum situation or not really?
Only if there's hands in the back.
Yep.
So as long as a referee can see hands and you're really using your hip to drive and you're showing that your hands are up, I can probably count on one hand the amount of offensive fouls.
Yep. No, that's great. Thanks again. There was a heap of questions, but like I said, you answered a lot as we sort of went through, so I didn't want to bombard you with too many more at the end that you sort of already touched on. So thanks again to Mel, obviously putting that on. And, I know you're still working over there and managing the family and everything like that. It was really great and getting a lot of positive feedback from people on text already. So thanks again for that. That was awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks for asking me, Reece. Appreciate it.
No worries. We'll now move into our second presenter, which is Mark Radford from Basketball Tasmania. Mark has a long coaching career, currently the high performance coach or manager for Basketball Tasmania. Also been Australian Junior and World Uni Games head and assistant coach for various teams. Been in the NBL as an assistant coach with the Perth Wildcats and Adelaide 36ers, and a long time SEABL coach with the Northwest Tassie Thunder. So I will pass over to Mark. He's going to present on the Tasmanian Way and how he's built up the program down there. So I'll pass over to you now, mate.
Great. Thanks, Reece. Hear me okay, mate?
Yep, all good.
Okay. All right. So the Tasmanian Way, or what we've started to call it probably in the last last 2 years. I'll just give you a little overview from the pre-2013 and sort of how I got to this point. Was coaching obviously in Adelaide with the 36ers and then got released from there. And it was a really challenging time, I think, for any coach that gets released from a job, that's in the national spotlight. It is really challenging to then move forward. But I got back to Tasmania and I recalled some information that I'd got back in 2002 from Damien Cotter. And Damien obviously went on to coach in the NBL and is doing really well in the US now. But his motto, when we were both coaching in the SEABL, was make the NBA where you're at. And I really stuck by that mantra. So when we come back to Tasmania, I applied for a position just in the Northwest Coast to be the regional development manager at that time. And then there was become a lot of change within Basketball Tasmania, and the board had changed considerably. And we'd had a new CEO had come in, and Chris McCoy, and there'd been a lot of structural change with the board, and basically a lot of upheaval. And I was just in the Northwest, was happy to do that job, was going to work under Justin Schuler. And then Justin had decided to move to country Victoria. So then all of a sudden now I'm in the position of head coach of the state. I hadn't really done any junior development from that standpoint. I'd been probably like most coaches in Tasmania. If you were passionate, you got thrown into a senior coaching role. And I coached senior men and women for basically my whole coaching career. So now I am the head coach of the state. Hadn't really done any junior coaching, done a little bit at it's what we call STP here as a volunteer coach. So here we are in the middle of some upheaval. I'm the only coach in the system. We had 1.5 staff basically working for Basketball Tasmania, and the 3 regions, and if anybody knows Tasmania, the 3 regions are very parochial. We have the north, south and northwest, and we're on an island, and they're basically 3 islands within the island, very parochial across all sports. So we had to deal with that stuff. From that standpoint, we had volunteer coaches in those 3 regions, and I then had to work with those to deliver the SDP, which is the under 16s and under 18 age group. So to get a feel for it, I started to move around the state to different sessions, and I got to my first SDP girls session in the north, and we had 6 players. And I felt that, one, what in the hell have I walked into? And then 2, we've obviously had a lot of change, but there's got to be more change needed. And traditionally, as Peter Lonergan said in his coaching clinics at time, if you've had change, you can guarantee you've got to get more change. And that's certainly what we did. And with that, we needed to build some trust. So what I had to do was I was starting to move around the state, was I needed to build trust and I needed to build relationships, and had to do it quite quickly. So with that, there was a lot of conversations, and one of them was with Andre Lamanis, who had come down from in his new role as the Boomers coach, had come down to our SDP camp. We have him in Launceston. Everybody come in. Andre was in for 3 days, did some coaching clinics, spent a lot of time with him. And we talked about a way forward and his thoughts on how we should go about it. And he said, one thing that you're going to need to realise, because I was going to implement the Australian style of way, and I was very familiar with it from coaching against Andre in the NBL, was that you needed to be patient and you needed to have great support from your CEO and the understanding of people around the state that it's going to take time. And the first we really locked in on was appointing 3 full-time coaches, which I'd really pushed in. Basically, in evaluating where we needed to get to, was developing our underpinning programs. I felt like we had a good high-performance program. It was run through the TIS, but that had changed also, and that partnership had gone by the wayside, but we had to have some good underpinning programs. So the state invested in 3 full-time coaches, invested in coach education, who David Munn's come into that position and has done an outstanding job here and Australia-wide, from top age to bottom age. Under 12s right through to under 18s. He does an outstanding job. So he'd come on board. And right now we stand at 8 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. And we're really proud that the board has been really supportive from the coaching standpoint, and they've really allowed me to drive the basketball side of it, obviously in consultation, but really give me the green light to drive that side of it. And, there's been a lot of challenging conversations, as, a lot of you would know, Reece, being in your position, and guys have worked for in clubland, that coming back as a high performance coach as such, you have a mindset that nothing's ever good enough and you want more. And then from an admin standpoint, you're always trying to find that balance. So you're constantly in negotiation. And we certainly had some robust conversations, Chris and I, and in staff meetings, some really strong conversations on the direction that we should go. And one thing that we did do, we had really strong debate, but when we left that meeting, we aligned, and then we went out and delivered what we agreed on, whether it was what I had first gone in there and wanted, or whether we come to the negotiation part. Once we left that meeting, we were all on the same page to go and deliver the content. So we had a strong top end, but what we must have was good underpinning programs. So we started with what we call now is the FDP, and some states already have it, and they had it in, I think in Queensland maybe it used to be under 13s, but we started right from under 12s. So we have under 12s and under 14s in our FDP, and our under 16s and 18s are our SDP. We then had to fill those coaching positions, which to start off was quite easy. Full-time coaching positions in the country are quite hard to get. So we had a range of coaches. Anthony Stewart's been in this position. He left and then has come back virtually in a part-time role. We had Sam Gruggan has been in this role and moved on, and he went to be the high performance manager in New South Wales. Mike Cassidy was here and then moved on to his role at the COE and done an outstanding job. Darren Best was here and he moved on, and he's now the head coach of Casey. So we've had some really good coaches here, and they've done an outstanding job, and they've moved on to some really good positions, which was great. When they were here, it was great for us and great for them. The challenge was, and part of building trust and relationships, is we needed to have some guys stay for a little bit longer. So when we got to a point where we interviewed just on 2 years ago now, Nick Martin and Brad Can, we interviewed, and they won the positions. And part of that was, I said, mate, boys, I need you here for 3 years. We need to build trust in the community that you guys have got to be around for a while. You've got to get to know the athletes, build trust with the athletes. And then whatever you're recruiting athletes, you're recruiting parents. So you need to build trust with the parents as well. So we've established a really good network coaches. And those coaches, Brad, Nick, myself, have really good support in that area. So with that, we then had to create good competition. So we have what we call the Tri-Series now, which is made up of the 3 regions. And you can see the picture there of the black being the northwest, the white being the south, and the red being the north. So we wanted to create rivalry, which was quite easy in Tasmania. You just pop into your 3 regions and you instantly get that rivalry. So we now have the Tri-Series makeup, which goes from under 12s right through to under 18s. And that is a really important part of our development. Another thing that we did with our under 12s, and I know there's been some conversations in different states about this, but we moved to a size 5 ball for our under 12s. And it's, without going into it too far in this presentation, I think it's been a revelation for the game, for 9-year-old girls especially, coming into under 12s and playing with a size 5 ball. It's made the game so much easier for them. And from a teaching standpoint, which one of the biggest teaching points for our under 12s is we just teach space, and being able to pass the ball over greater distances has allowed the game to be played with more space. And then with more space, kids can then use their skill because they're not running into a scrum in the middle of the keyway. So that's been really good for us from that standpoint. So moving on, we then got onto our branding, which took us quite a while to get to because there's so many other things going on behind the scenes. So we got to our branding, and getting a clothing supplier that could deliver on roughly 350 athletes on a consistent basis was a real challenge for us. But to have our branding and our Tri-Series, within our Tri-Series gear, also our Country Cup gear and our state gear was really important for us in the state, because one of our goals was, without a beaten written, but definitely talked about early, is no matter where we go in the state, I want to be able to see kids from Basketball Tasmania programs. And I was turning up to football games, I used to go and watch a little bit of hockey. And you would see kids there that were in programs, but they'd be wearing their BTAS gear. So our branding got out there, and it sort of fits in with where we want to be by 2023 in the state's overall philosophy as being the number one sport of choice for kids in Tasmania. So branding was really, really important for us. And our sales within our clothing department, who Kylie French, who has predominantly worked in the clothing area, who now is in finance as well, has done an outstanding job with our clothing. Now, why it may sound simple, and we probably should have done it right from the start. When I first started in my job, the state didn't have very much money, hence the 1.5 staff. So it was very difficult to have clothing in a store and be able to hold clothing. But now I feel like we've done a great job of that. We've got a store in our Launceston shop at Elphin, and it's really accessible to everybody. The store is now online, and I think that's really starting to grow. And it's a great one. It's great for our branding, and it's another form of revenue we can have to continually to grow our programs. The other thing that we did was we have our normal BTAS Facebook page, which has a certain amount of content go through it. And then when teams go to Country Cup and Nationals, there's only so much content that we wanted to put through that page. So we started up separate pages for those two tournaments where families and friends can really lock in and see those athletes and coaches at those tournaments in its entirety. And there's a lot of content that was driven through there, and we feel like that's just been another area that we've been able to drive our brand through those pages that are separate to the normal basketball page. And part of that was also giving more importance to those two tournaments, because as you come through the age groups, we're always talking about the pinnacle, and being the pinnacle for us is under 18 nationals, because that's when we still have access to the kids within programming on a weekly basis. So we started up those pages, and it's just able to drive content through there. Twitter, obviously another form of social media, and Nick Martin drives that now and does a great job. And our Instagram page is, I think, at this stage, #1 in Tasmanian sport. And Scott Boucher does an outstanding job of driving that. Another part of having our own pages is we can deliver our own message, and that's really important. Coming back to being able to share stuff with families, delivering our own message, and getting them to buy in and believe in what we're doing, we felt was really important. Another area which we used to have in the past, we've always had STP camps, but then obviously with our FDP coming into play, we really ramped up our camp part of our programming. And we have 3 FDP camps a year. Under 12s are separate, under 14s are separate, and then SDP, right, they all come in together. And we've really made them a holistic approach. We have presentations off the floor that myself and Nick and Brad will rotate doing. We invite presenters in to present in different areas. All athletes in the program, approximately 350, have their own notebooks, and they have to bring those to weekly sessions and definitely to camps. We talk about pathways. within the Australian landscape and also within Tasmania, especially for the under-12s that just come in. We talk about social media. We've had letter writing in the past, and especially with the older kids and where they want to get to and what their aspirations are. Done team building sessions, constantly doing whiteboard sessions with all age groups, goal setting. I'll always do a style of play presentation and that usually starts at under 14 age group. We have past athletes come in and talk to the groups, and they talk about their pathway and what they've experienced. And it's great for them to be able to share their experiences with the younger kids. And we have invited presenters that come in and deliver different content. We also go over our common language for Basketball Tasmania, cover off, as I said, on our style of play and system of play, which I'll touch on that in a moment. The other thing that camps enable us to do is for the coaches to be all on the same page. So if I come with some new content, then we can come in and we can deliver that at our camps and then go back to our weekly sessions and continually work on it. And it just enables the three coaches to be all on the same page with our core content that we want to deliver. On a weekly basis, we don't have to deliver exactly the same drills, but we have to teach the same language, and we want to be on point with the main concepts that we want to teach that are going to enable the kids to go into state trials and country cup trials, or for the older kids to go on to Australian development camps and be all on the same page, all right, of what we're teaching, so we give those kids the best opportunity, all right, to have success. Another thing that we've really ramped up, especially in the last 2 years, is the high performance camps. So when I first started, we had 2 camps, and they were 2 one-day camps. And we've now got it to a point where our high performance camp, we have 2 one-day camps still. We use one of those camps of testing for our NPP athletes to come into. And we've now got a camp, which is a 3-day camp that we're really proud of, where we've got this when it comes to a selection process for this camp. So we have kids right across the straight valuing when they're selected for it. We have national coaches come in, and we've had, over the last 2 years, we've had Lono come in, we've had Kristen Veal come in, we've had Mike Cassidy come in. Lono was due to come back this year, and we were aiming to get Adam Capehorn to come in, but we couldn't get that done. But he if he's watching this, he does owe us, so we'll get him down the track. As you can see in the picture, Dr. Casey Mainsbridge, who is a lecturer at the university here in Tasmania, come in and presented on elite athlete mindset to the athletes. Ryan Carroll come in and presented on how to tape your own ankles, and Ryan is a current Boomers physiotherapist. So our aim is to get some elite presenters in. We go through a range of different education topics at the camps. We've introduced on the Sunday night of the camp, so the athletes come in on Saturday morning and then go out on Monday afternoon. On the Sunday night, we've now introduced what we call the Bleed Green game. And we want to continually grow that to a point where we have parents and family come and watch that game and make it very prestigious, have referees come in. And what we're trying to do as best we possibly can is just replicate as close as we can to an Australian development camp. So this year was really happy where we got that camp too. Part of one of the issues that we do have here in Tasmania, and I'm sure other coaches, especially state coaches in preparation for national championships, is trying to find better competition all the time. So one thing that we, as a state body, started up was this state league competition, which runs over 3 weekends, and it's a tournament-based competition, culminating in a weekend that coincides with our gala dinner and a heap of education for our clubs right across the state, and the state league finals. And what we do is we pick a high performance team, boys and girls team, and they play in this state league competition against senior men's and women's teams from right around the state. And we've now been going since 2014, and our girls team won it this year in November for the first time. So they were very, very happy. We were happy. We've been to a couple of grand finals with the girls and one grand final with the boys, and wasn't quite able to get over the line. But one thing it does, it just gives our athletes a great opportunity to play against older bodies. It gives us a chance to continually implement our style of play. Gives us another opportunity to bring athletes together on a regular basis. It's a selection process, so athletes then value that. And also with our HP and state teams, it gives us a chance to play in state tournaments. Our under-18s and under-20 state teams play in a tournament in February against seniors as part of their preparation moving forward. And that's been really good for our teams to be able to get into that, play against adults, and then head off to under-18s and 20 nationals. So part of our hashtag Bleed Green, hashtag the Tasmanian Way that we've really tried to drive over the last couple of years was placed around just valuing the green singlet more than what I felt people had done. I felt like a little bit, yep, I'm playing for Tasmania and it's really nice, but I just didn't feel, and it was my feelings, it didn't come from anybody else, but I really felt that we had to have players value that you're making a Tasmania team, and it's an honour and a privilege. So when we had to do some things to make it that way. So we started with, and it was the brainchild of Kylie French again. We were sitting around having good conversations. How can we make things better? How can we make our athletes value playing for Tasmania even more? So we introduced a singlet presentation night, and we weren't really sure how it was going to go. So we had the first one. We had over 100 parents and grandparents come to it. It was a catered dinner, and we had a guest speaker come and speak that had been a past athlete and one of the first people we got was Brett Smith, who had been a silver medal captain from one of our under-16 national championships with Victoria. It was the Andre Lamanis and Shane Hill group had beaten them by 2 points in Launceston back in 1984. And we asked Brett to come in and talk about what it meant for him to play for Tasmania. And we've continued that theme across all our state teams. So we have 3 of these a year, one for the 16s, 18s and 20s. And as often as we can, we bring past players, coaches and administrators in to talk about what it meant for them to be a part of a Tasmanian state team. Also, what we've done is we've exceeded our aim is exceed our own expectations. So obviously in my job, you have a good feel of roughly where you can finish after being at Country Cup with athletes. And as they start to come through, you have a feeling of where you probably should finish or have a chance to finish at nationals. So what we've really started to do is talk to teams about, we expect you to finish in the top 8, or we expect you to finish in the top 6. And we've really challenged athletes, coaches, ourselves, we're all in this together, of exceeding our own expectations and wanting to, it's not just Tassie and we're heading off to nationals. We go away to try and exceed our own expectations. And I think that's good to have pressure on you, and it's healthy pressure. And the athletes have really embraced that so far. And then obviously, as I've touched on, the hashtags, we usually try and use those, all right, mainly at nationals, all right, because that's obviously where we wear the green singlet. The Tasmanian Way document, it's a document, it's been spoken internally a little bit about. We have, it's an evolving document, because one thing we wanted to do with it, we wanted to be able to put it out to all our athletes from under 12s to under 18s and make it fit. So it's been something that I've played around with, Nick and Brad have played around with in the last 12, 18 months. And I think it's nearly ready to where we can deliver it in its entirety. and that has our values and behaviours in that we want our athletes to live by on a weekly basis, and especially when they're on the floor with us and in camps. It covers off on our style of play, and it covers off on our system of play. Again, it's an evolving document. It's something that I feel within 12 months' time, it can be changed up, especially with our system of play. Our style of play, I think, will stay the same, but our system of play is always evolving, whether it be from across the state or whether it be from team to team, depending on personnel. The other thing that it talks about is within our values and behaviours is we are here for the team. It's a team-first approach. And you play for Tasmania and you play your role. And part of playing your role and going away and doing well for Tasmania, right, will then give you an opportunity to have individual success. So the most important thing for us and our athletes is you play well for Tasmania, first and foremost. You don't play for Tasmania to play for Australia or get a college scholarship or get a COE scholarship. It's all about trying to win as many games as we possibly can at nationals for Tasmania. And then a byproduct of that is the individual success that you can have. And obviously over the last 6 or 7 years, we've had some great success. We certainly want more, but the kids that have been in and done really well, we're really proud of them. And the photos explain a group of athletes that have done a great job individually. And we've had some, obviously, team success this year with the bronze medal at the Under-20 Nationals. And some of those athletes have won medals on the international stage in the last 12 months as well. And I'll leave you with the last thing before I'll take, if there's any questions, Reece, is living by this has been really important for us, is just make the NBA where you're at. And that was Damien Cotter spoke about that in 2002, and he was at the Knox Basketball Club. And I thought the Knox Basketball Club was the biggest thing that I'd ever seen when I was coaching in the SEABL. And I was coaching in Northwest Tassie, and we were battling financially. We had one import, and we come up against them, and they had NBL players and imports. And the conversation was a real eye-opener for me. And he just said, make the NBA where you're at. So at that time, the Northwest Thunder was our NBA. And I've taken the same philosophy here. And I think for those coaches that are always looking to move up and what's next, I think if you can make where you're at your MBA and do a great job, then good opportunities will find you along the way. So I hope you get something out of that. I've tried to encapsulate 7 years worth of work into a talk of, 30, 35 minutes. So again, if anybody ever wants to call and ask questions about some other things that we've done here, then I'm happy to take anybody's call and talk hoops at any stage. So,
thanks for that, Rat. That was really good. I think people really got to see the holistic approach, to building that program. It wasn't just you're a good coach and you've come out there and put in some good plays. It was really everything from the uniforms to the social, like the whole thing of how you sort of built that up was really good to get some context. So there's a few questions, mate. So can you clarify the difference between the style of play and system of play? Because you said your style of play will stay the same, your system of play will ever be evolving. So can you clarify the difference on that one for the coaches?
Yeah, certainly. So, and this has been obviously a lot of conversation over the last 6 or 7 years in the basketball network. So the style of play is for us, and we took on some of the boomers' language with this, was pace, poise, penetration, which has clearly revolved around the shots that you want to take in what phases of the shot clock on the offensive side. And then on the defensive side, we've developed a little bit of our own in the phases of the shot clock. Early shot, we want to be disruptive. Middle part of the clock, we want to make sure we contain. And then late clock, everything is contest and make people score over us. So we've phased, put it the defensive side of it, we've also put into 3 parts of the shot clock. So style of play, pace, poise, penetration. disrupt, contain, contest on the defensive side. And then the offensive side, our system of play is flow-based with a whole range of different concepts. And we've started to move in the last 12 months into some different motion-based, we call it motion, but it's more some Princeton-style action, and introducing those concepts on one side of it. On the other side of the ball, defensively, is our version of the pack defense with a little bit more denial in different areas and different types of disruption up the floor.
So would it be fair to say style of play is sort of the general themes, and that's going to stay the same, but the actual system of play is the actual structures, the actual offensive action you run and things like that. Is that the difference for coaches to understand?
Definitely. Yep. And that is forever evolving. It evolves for certain teams. It might be different concepts for different teams. And I think this has been the misunderstood part of flow offense throughout Australia when Andre started in his position was, I felt like the flow offense was a really good teaching offense. I felt like it taught good spacing. I felt like you could put any concept into that framework that you wanted. And, you know, if you go back and watch his New Zealand teams and then watch the Boomers and then watch Cairns, who Fernie took on a chunk of the flow concepts, there was just so many different wrinkles put into that framework, different post actions into that framework, that I think it got a little bit lost when people just thought it was back cut, dribble, handoff. We've actually gone away with the back cut, dribble, handoff for the older age groups and introduced some back cut, lift and throw and follow in that part of the offense. For the younger age groups, we've kept the dribble, handoff in because it's really difficult to do, and we feel like it's good skill development for young kids to have to work dribble, handoff scenarios. Yep. So I hope that sort of clears that up.
No, definitely. Really good. Really good. This is a good one and a bit of left field, but how do you deal with stakeholders, and you'll deal with a lot of different ones, who show resistance to change?
I think, and there's no doubt we've still got people here within the state that resist change. And I think all you can do is communicate your beliefs and make sure that you are strong and consistent in your beliefs. Try and make those people understand the benefits of the change, and then try and bring them on the journey with you. Don't disclude them. And there's been a couple of individuals here in Tasmania who I have really good relationships with that just don't believe in some of the things that we've done. And that's fine. I don't not talk to them. I have great conversations with them. They just have a different philosophy, and there's no right or wrong. I think I had to put, and I thought what was best for Tasmania is that we have an overall philosophy. We don't bring state players together and have short preparation and try and put a system in to go and win on a national stage. I just felt like that was really difficult. I felt like it was unfair to the players to try and pick up a whole new system within, a couple of months. Under 20s is even less.
Yep.
And because we have programming and it's layered and it's weekly and it progresses as the age groups go up, I felt like that made sense to do it that way. And not everybody agreed with it, which is okay. But I think consistent with your philosophy and your beliefs, share them. Keep putting them out there with your clinics and camps, and keep inviting those people.
Yep.
Because there's definitely some people on the front end of what we were doing are all in right now, because I feel like we've stayed consistent with our messages. We haven't jumped around all over the place, so they can see that we believe in what we're doing.
Yep. No, that's awesome. I think that's a really good answer. What's the biggest difference you've seen? You went from predominantly coaching adults at the elite level and professional level to coaching, elite juniors. What was the biggest difference and adjustment? What do you see as that? What's different?
Well, probably the biggest thing for me was probably more the under 12s and 14s. That was I was really nervous, apprehensive early. I'm thinking, what am I going to coach at under 12s and 14s when I've just gone from coaching Adam Gibson, Daniel Johnson, excuse me, Jason Kadee. So that was really challenging for me. So if we just left them out, because that's a whole new conversation, I had to do some research and conversations, from that standpoint. The 16s and 18s, it's just the uptake. I think I kept the drills very similar, the teaching points similar. It just didn't move as quick. So where you're telling Daniel Johnson on one day to get this done, and by the next day it's in and it's going, and you can just move quicker. All it meant is you just move slower, and you're just a little bit more patient. And a great term that Andre used was, you just got to be comfortable with the mess. And it was definitely messy early. And it was really difficult for me to be able to, not stop it and try and fix it, be able to just let people play and play through the mess and teach on the run. I think that was the biggest challenge early, and the difference from seniors to juniors.
Yeah. Patience.
Development, not winning.
Yeah, that's right. In Tassie, are you guys doing much with video and that side of the game to sort of develop your coaches and use that? Or is it, where are you guys at with sort of the technical side and the video?
We don't have any sports code, I have a sports code license, a couple of us do, but to be able to get it out and share it, and we probably haven't done as much as what we should have. It's an area that we want to get into, our high performance camps, from that standpoint. As a state, we don't have any, financially, we don't have where we can go and, purchase those licenses, and that if there's actually an area that I feel like we could have done better and we need to do better in the future, is helping our coaches with video editing and scouting. And not that we can't do it, and obviously we can, and some people have really been really proactive, especially the state coaches from that standpoint. But I wouldn't say that we're cutting edge from that side of it in, delivering it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's good. You can't have everything, mate. You can't have everything. A couple more. Any tips for less athletic teams? I mean, you're coming up against, teams on a regular basis when you're coaching for Tassie that are just got different types of athletes to what you have. No disrespect to the kids from Tassie, but sometimes you don't have as good of athletes as we might have here in Vic Metro. What's your tips for sort of players that are coaching those less athletic teams? How do you overcome that?
I think that's where the style of play has really held us in good stead. If you watch Tasmanian teams, traditionally we don't take bad shots. We've traditionally, from some of the analytics you can get from nationals, that we're one of the slower paced teams. We've worked really hard on not giving up layups, and we've been a tag up state for the last 3 years. But the style of play and not taking bad shots and having players really understand their roles and not playing crazy, I think has really helped us with not having genuine bigs and not having, the more athletic. There's very, very little European background in Tasmania, that we just don't have that sort of population. We don't have the Sudanese population here. Yeah. We're very Anglo-Saxon, non-athletic, to a point, state. So I feel like the style of play and knowing what you want and knowing your players really understanding roles when you get to national championships is really important. I think that's helped us.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Do you have much difficulty accessing athletes versus school sport or other sports and activities, and how do you sort of overcome that? Because a lot of rep coaches and clubs will sort of face that challenge. What's the difficulty like down there?
Not as bad, obviously, as Melbourne, and we don't have it. The private schools aren't as what's the word? Maybe dogmatic. They're not employing full-time coaches to coach their school teams, so it's not as big. It's starting to filter that way a little bit. I can see it heading that way more and more. I think you've got to work with them. You're not going to, once you get to the point where they have full-time coaches and they're giving out, we do have some kids that have scholarships. So that is important that you support those families, if they're getting some of their academics paid for. And I always say, if you're getting your schooling paid for, then that is number one, family, school, basketball in that order for us. But you just work with the athletes. And part of it I've used is if you feel like you're going to miss, because a lot of our school basketball is during the middle of the week. If you're going to miss an SDP session or a HP session and you're going into an environment that can't replicate that, then you are putting yourself in a position that's not going to be good for you long term. Mm. And I think it teaches, I'm not dogmatic on it. I'm not like you must be here. I think that teaches kids and families, you've got to make decisions because you've got to have to make them down the track.
Correct.
When you've got to choose at under 18s, when you start to specialise a little bit more in the sport, you're going to have to make those decisions. So I'm not going to make those for you. I'm going to give you the case of being at our sessions. You got to give me the case. And then in the end, it's your basketball career. And also understanding that if you miss too much of this, it's going to put you behind here. So I think painting the picture and not getting caught up in it. I know earlier I used to get caught up in it a little bit, but I don't get caught up in it now.
Yep.
You got to make decisions. We've all got them, and hopefully you make the right one.
Yep. You mentioned about the notebooks, and I've seen you guys do it. I think it's really good. What are the kids generally writing in them? What are they putting down in the books? What are you encouraging them? Do you say this is what you should be writing, or is it just what they come up with? What with those notebooks in the practices and the camps? What are you encouraging them to put in there?
Yep. So one thing we've got an hour and a half a week with each group, and one thing that we've emphasised is you're getting feedback at some stage during that training session. And we don't do it at the end of every session. And we probably should do it more, but we try to fit an hour and a half, and most of us have back-to-back sessions. So the second group always has more time to put notes in their notebook.
Yep.
But if you've been given feedback from that session, that stuff needs to go in your notebook. If we've been doing some shooting technique as such, then you might want to take some teaching points down that you may have got from a network coach or from the head coach. We might have put a new concept in that night. So you might have wanted to put and draw some pictures in your book. So also them being able to come up with some, the basketball language, drawing lines, arrows, passes, cuts, being able to put that in your book, especially for the younger age groups. And then at camps, being able to finish each session and then writing feedback. And then there's a lot of times you'll get with a partner and have them give you feedback from your session, especially if you've done some partner work.
Yep.
So I think anything you want, you might just be asking questions. What did you think of this tonight? Or we worked on pick and roll defense tonight. How did you perform guarding the ball?
Yep.
What was your strengths and weaknesses?
Yep. No, that's really good. What do you see as the key skill sets you're trying to get in those Tassie athletes? If you had to pick a couple, what are they sort of the key skill package you're looking at for those players to have?
Well, we have a lot of guards, so you have to be able to shoot it. Yep. And you spend and we don't mind shooting threes, boys and girls. Some may say a little bit too much, but we've got to be able to shoot the ball, and I think we do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, definitely.
And we had a lot of good conversations around shooting, and so much of it's natural, and then some of it's, technique-wise and volume. But definitely you've got to be able to handle the ball, got to be able to shoot it, and we have a big emphasis of our bigs, our Tasmanian bigs, being able to pass it. Now, we have a lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement, and the bigs have to be able to pass it, have to be able to pivot, reverse pivots, play off the elbows, pass out of the post.
No, that's really good. And definitely, from my observations, being in Tassie for a little while, they definitely, you could see that emphasis on the shooting, and it's obviously helped you guys be competitive and regular top 4 finishes and things like that in the last few years. So, yeah, it's definitely there, and you can tell you've emphasised and valued it. I've got a bit of a long one, so I'm going to try and get through it. But it's around specialisation. So you want basketball to be the number one sport of choice in Tassie. How do you balance that with encouraging a multi-sport approach? Basically before they're 15, 16 years old. And how does that sort of look? And when do you sort of see specialisation needing to come in for athletes to really start to excel?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely against early specialisation. I think we want kids to have basketball as the sport of choice when it's time to choose.
Yep.
And I recommend, and one thing that we do at the start of each cycle, Brad, Nick and myself, and we have done this for 7 years, is we will do a presentation to all age groups' parents. And we talk to them about that we encourage and we want your children to play other sports, and we are willing to fit in and navigate that space with you.
Yep.
And it happens a lot when we have camps of a weekend, and there'll be a netball tournament on, there'll be football on, there'll be cricket on. And I said, you just got to find a balance. Like if you've missed the last 2 camps, then you need to be at this one. But working with parents through that space and talking to them that we want them to play other sports, finding a balance, difficult to do 3. I think 2's good. And then a lot of sports complement each other.
Definitely.
From that standpoint. I think if you want to really be good at basketball, by the time, and I've sort of picked this age because I think this is where you really need to hone in, is when you're coming out of 16s and going into 18s. I find that that's a time that you need to lock in if you want to be really good, because you need a volume of work to be good at basketball.
Yep. No, I think that's a great answer, and I think there'd be a lot of research that would back that up. So I think that's really good. Last one here from the guru himself. He wanted to know if the hashtag bleed green came from the walls of the New Caledonia accommodation at the last Oceania Championships.
Those walls were black, not green. So no, it didn't. It actually come out of after a very passionate win at under 18 nationals in 2017, and it just popped up. And then someone told me that was the Celtics hashtag as well, and I was like, who? That's where it come from.
That's good, mate. Thanks again. Obviously, that was awesome. I think the one thing you emphasised a lot, and I don't know when we spoke about this, but I remember talking to you about that quote, make where you're at your MBA, and it certainly stuck with me, and it's certainly advice that I give to coaches that I'm mentoring on a regular basis and sort of ask about things. Just, do a really good job of where you're at, and I constantly try and remind myself of that quote and make sure I really value and take every opportunity of where I am and don't sort of take things for granted. So I think that's a great one for coaches to take away. If they take away one thing, just, be great where you're at, and the other things will all come from itself. And I'm forever grateful for that little bit of advice on that plane whenever that was, and it'll stay with me for a long time, mate. And again, thanks for your presentation. It was something different for us that we've had so far, and it was really awesome.
No worries. Appreciate everything you're doing. Love the clinics, love the format, and the uptake has obviously been awesome for you guys. If anybody wants any more on the style of play, system of play, happy to email that out. If people want it, it's not a closed document. If we can help coaches in any way, or I can, or Nick or Brad, then happy to share that.
No, brilliant, mate. Thank you so much. And I'll just flag with the coaches our presentations for next week. So very lucky to continue this on again next week with 2 great coaches, Guy Malloy, Melbourne Boomers and New Zealand national team head coach. Obviously, on top of that, he's coached at the NBL level, SEABL level, all different on men's, women's. So it'll be great. He's going to talk about things that will help any team offense. And then we've got a guy that Mark had mentioned before, Sam Gruggan, high performance head coach for New South Wales Metro. He's going to talk about full court pressure defense. So 2 great presenters again next week. Hope to see you there. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks, Reece.